Come, let me take a walk with Brother Tiki. You'll see our landmarks and our monuments, they're so unique. The high brick structure, the lighthouse, the tallest wooden structure, cathedral, 176th Street, monuments, and the beautiful.
Good evening and welcome to Plain Talk. My name is Christopher Ram. Thank you for joining me this evening. As you will see very shortly, that the discussion tonight is on the Guyana Public Service Credit Union, and there it is, which for you who follow the news might know that there are issues concerning the holding of meetings and elections, and this matter has now reached the courts. On Plain Talk this evening are two of the persons who are seeking to be appointed to the committee. The committee members are de facto directors. It's just that they're called committee members. On my immediate left is Mr. Judah Louisi, and to his left is Christopher Thompson. One is a chartered accountant, one is an attorney at law. Gentlemen, welcome to Plain Talk.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Good.
The Public Service Cooperative Credit Union. It sounds like three concepts in one: public service, co-op, and a credit union. Help me. What is this organization?
Well, Mr. Ram, it's a peculiar name indeed. And oftentimes we are confused with the trade union, the GPS labor union. At one point we shared similar management at one point. But the credit union is a separate entity. It's a co-op. It's a lending co-op that is designed to encourage thrift amongst its members, and it acts as a reservoir for financial empowerment of its members also. Of course, as the name will indicate, its membership is drawn exclusively from the public service. Civil servants are the only one eligible to join this particular credit union. There are many other credit unions, but for public servants, this is a credit union for civil servants across the country. And we have a very wide and liberal definition of a civil servant. Mm-hmm. It goes from your regular government ministry employee to semi-autonomous agencies such as NIS, GGM.
So it's more public sector.
Public sector than public service, indeed.
Yeah.
Mr. Louisi, you like to add?
Yeah, well, the credit union, as we call it, usually when persons hear credit union, they immediately think of the Guyana Public Service Cooperative Credit Union. Most persons believe this is the only credit union in existence. Guyana has just under 30 credit unions, most of which are still fully functional, and some of them are, we would say, dormant. But there are many other credit unions and credit unions that allow persons in the private sector to join.
Where does co-op get into it? That's part of its name. Mm-hmm. What's the significance there? Co-op.
Yeah, very importantly, the significance there is that credit union is simply another form of co-op, of a cooperative, and it comes under the Cooperative Societies Act, Chapter 8801. So the regulator of the credit union is the regulator for all co-ops, whether it's a building co-op, it's a marketing co-op. The credit union is just another form of co-op, and we are heavily regulated by the Chief Cooperative Development Officer. An example of that regulation includes the appointment of auditor, external auditor for the credit union is done by the regulator, whose decision is final on the selection of the auditor.
How old is that legislation?
I'm embarrassed.
Sure.
It has to be in excess of 60 years old. It's definitely pre-independence. That's for sure. Previously, it was known as the ordinance. The GPS CCU was registered in 1964. That's 2 years before Guyana gained independence. So that should tell you the state of the legislation. And, well, yeah, it's very old.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Do you have anything to add to that? You identified as the one of the salient features of the act regulating the body is that the chief cooperative officer appoints the auditor.
Yeah.
Is that what other role is exercised? What other supervisory or regulatory role is exercised over the society, the
Well-
credit union?
Well, the CCDO, as most persons would call the Chief Co-op Development Officer, functions basically to ensure the credit union stays in line with legislation and the rules. For example, the credit union is required to have annual general meeting. Save any justifiable reason that should be enforced by the CCDO. The CCDO is there to make sure that the funds within the organization is put to the benefits of the organization and to make sure that you color within the lines. So, for example, seeing that this is the public service credit union and it only allows public servants to join, the CCDO is there to make sure somebody from the private sector does not join this credit union, because that impacts on the survival of other credit unions.
But how can that person do that? How does the CCDO exercise that power? Do you have to report that this person is a member of the public service?
Right. So the CCDO have unlimited rights to examine the books of the credit union, all records of the credit union at any time. So the CCDO is allowed to sending officers to request any documentation, to request information, whatever he or she sees fit. And as such, if they believe something requires an investigation, they're allowed to do so.
What kind of resources does the credit union command, does it own? Meaning, what assets does it have in terms of cash, in terms of investments, in terms of real property?
Right.
Yeah.
The last audited financial statements, which was 2020, December 31st, 2020, the credit union had just about $5.3 billion in total assets.
5.3 billion.
Billion
That's
dollars.
5,000 million.
Correct. Right? Of that, just about 2 billion was cash and cash equivalents, and just about 3 billion was loans. To date, that number has certainly increased, and the total assets of the Guyana Public Service Cooperative Credit Union is somewhere around $6 billion, with just over I think probably about $4 to $4.5 billion in loans.
All right, we'll get to that. I want to ask you some more questions there. But just as a matter of, so that the public understands, you are both ex-employees of the credit union,
Yes, indeed, we are.
and you are also part of what's referred to as Team Ben.
Yes.
Yes,
Indeed.
that too.
You're allowed to remain as members, of the credit union, despite the fact that you've left the public service?
Yes, the requirement for membership only applies upon entry. So you are required to be a public servant for entry into the credit union. But your continued membership is not dependent on you remaining a civil servant or a public servant. It's a peculiarity, but that's the current requirement.
You think that was the intention? Just think about it. And to make the point, a person was a public service in the public service for 2 years, became a member, goes off and works in the private sector. 30 years later, in the private sector, that person still have access to the resources and to the governance of this entity?
Indeed, I rather suspect it may have been a lacuna, or may be a lacuna rather, in the legislation, but the legislation is silent on your continued membership when you're no longer a member of the civil service,
Or the public service?
public service makeup, and therefore we are unable to expel members on that basis.
Yeah.
Well, it's not only expelled, they could cease to become members, maybe within a year after leaving the public service.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if it is considered, it would have to be some time after, because what you would find is that most members would have a loan or loans with the credit union at the time of moving on from the public service. So, for example, if a member leaves the public service and they have a loan, of course the credit union's expectation is that that member will fulfill their obligation, because you certainly would have signed a loan bond, which is a legally binding document, and that goes beyond where you work. The money must be repaid.
Yes.
So I think if it is something that is explored, you would have to look at a time lapse, or maybe the loan bond would have to be amended to state that if you leave in the public service, well then your loan is repaid on demand or something of the sort. But yeah.
Is there a lot of that happening? Persons in the public service take a loan and then leave. Practically being opportunistic.
Not a lot in terms of delinquency. The credit union is well on par with other financial institutions, and the credit union has debts that go way back to 1976. But if you check the loans granted for the year, or the loans outstanding at the end of the year, compared to the number of delinquent loans within the same year, you would find that that percentage is somewhere below 5%.
76.
Way back to
It's
1976.
46 years ago.
Yes.
So
yes.
people would have person have had loan
That
for 46
takes us
46
back.
years.
That takes us back to a previous point relative to the powers of the regulator. So co-ops, credit unions included, are not allowed to do debt write-off without the approval of the regulator. So, and the regulator, historically, not only this current regulator, but historically has not been approving debt write-off on an annual basis. There seemed to always be an eternal hope of recouping those monies, even after there is clearly
Which world do you live in?
Guyana, apparently.
No. Guyana, you write out the law. In fact, if you were a
Yes.
commercial bank,
Yeah.
governed by the
Yeah.
by the Financial Institutions Act.
Indeed. Indeed. So what you have there on the books, and which has a direct impact on the financial statement, is that it looks as though these monies are receivable, when in fact, I'm very sure the great bulk of these members have passed on.
Right. But that is the case. That is the case to some extent. But what has been done is that annually a provision is applied to the receivables balance. Right. So I think the delinquency would be somewhere in excess of $100 million from then to present. But most of that, a provision has been created for.
Yeah, and just to add to what Mr. Louisi said earlier, is that our current rate of delinquency is well within the acceptable rate that is currently accepted amongst commercial banks, and that's less than 5%.
Well, do you really know that if you're not subject to the same kind of rules?
Yeah, because what you can actually do is examine the number of members and the total loans that when delinquent or has become delinquent within that period compared to the loans portfolio for that particular period. So you check the delinquency to the loans portfolio and you're able to arrive to the percentage
So,
of
Mr. Rapp,
delinquency for that period.
I think the great irony here is that poor folks make an extra special effort to service their loans.
Yes, but
Yeah, I
46 years is a long time.
It's a long
It
time.
is.
Yeah, it's a long
Sorry.
time, and it needs to come off the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely does have to come
Yeah.
off the books.
The challenge is also that unlike other financial institutions, as a credit union, as a co-op, you're not allowed to prosecute borrowers for outstanding debts. What you would actually have to do is go through a process of arbitration, where the CCDO appoints an arbitrator to actually now negotiate with the member with the outstanding balance and come to new terms and conditions as to whether this loan will be paid, how it will be paid, and over what period of time it will be paid. The trouble with that is that if that is agreed, if you're able to find the member, if the arbitrator is appointed, which as far as I know one was not appointed since 2006, and it is agreed upon, the member may still not honor their obligation.
It seemed extremely liberal. In fact, lax is probably a better word.
No, I would agree. The credit union is designed to accommodate, and I go back to my initial point as to who is a public servant. It goes from janitorial staff, your regular sweeper cleaner, up to the highest office of the land. His Excellency is a public servant, as we know, and therefore he's eligible to join the credit union. Right. So what you find is that we have to cater for a wide base of membership, and your product has to reflect the makeup of your membership.
You know, that might be very noble. But when one puts money into a credit union, one expects that the credit union has strict rules that that money is not going to get frittered away and lost in bad debts.
It's
So
true.
there is an obligation. I don't know, you're a lawyer, Mr. Thompson. These committee members, do they have a fiduciary obligation to ensure that the funds are secured and not? This is serious business. 6 billion is serious. It's one thing to have noble intentions, but
Yeah.
tell me about the fiduciary obligation of those members of the committee.
Yes. So indeed, the members of the committee are indeed directors akin to a director of a company, whose first and foremost obligation is to the company. So members of the committee, foremost obligation is to the credit union and its members. And we keep harping on the powers of the regulator because the powers of the regulator is real. The credit union is kept on a tight leash by the regulator. As a matter of fact, Regulation 56 of the Cooperative Societies Regulation allows the regulator to impose her executive will almost ad nauseum at any time. She could remove an officer, an entire board, at the drop of a hat. Literally. I think that is
Well, probably due process will have to apply.
I don't know if that always applies. Historically,
Reasonable. We don't want to discuss law, but the reasonable test obviously comes in.
I would hope so indeed. But historically, that has not been done, and it would have engaged the attention of the court on more than one occasions. But relative to whether members' funds are secured, are safe, and are being used in a prudent manner, the answer is yes. Now, you raise some concerns as to the liberal nature of granting loans. There is a cap on every loan based on your income. So if you are able to get a loan from the credit union in a very easy manner, chances are that that's a very small loan. Because what we try to do is make sure that members' needs are catered for according to their ability. So let's say one of our members is a janitorial staff. He may be able to qualify for a $60,000 loan in not too much of an encumbering way to really frustrate him or her, as opposed to a member who is a permanent secretary.
Who gets a tax-free car, perhaps?
Maybe indeed.
Yes.
Yes.
And they get a loan to borrow it as well. To borrow as well.
From the credit union, yes, they do.
At the highest level, permitted level as well.
At the highest level, as long as you reach the qualifications, and they are very indeed strict qualifications for these loan products. I say that because relative to the recent products we've had introduced, and when we get there, we were hearing about the success stories, but there's a great hundreds of applications that were turned down. We have granted perhaps in excess of 300 vehicle loan application. At the same time, perhaps turned down 3 times that number. So there's a great level of scrutiny and a great level of due diligence exercise in these loan products.
You know, you raise an issue because, yes, there's no question, and I've always been a firm believer in cooperatives. I think one of the bad things we've done that rank with the scrapping of the railway, for example, is not pay attention to the co-ops.
The co-ops in general.
That has been part of our culture from where we came,
Indeed.
Asia and Africa.
Indeed.
Now, my concern is that, noble as the objectives are, the people with money who can afford to go to a commercial bank and get a facility comes to the credit union for loan.
One of the great problems you have with organization of a public nature is how do you positively discriminate? I don't know if that's the correct term, but it's and more so in a multicultural kind of society like Guyana, to apply a means test, for want of a better term.
Not necessarily means there's something called interest. And say that loans up to 100,000 will be granted at X percent, and in excess of between 101 and to 500,000 at X plus 2%, and you do it like that.
Indeed.
There is a cap. There is a cap on the maximum percentage as well, which is
6.
if you're not allowed to
12,
do more than 1%
Per month.
or 12% per annum, regardless of the loan product,
Yeah.
and that is legislation.
That's legislation.
But that's crazy.
Yeah. So you are boxed in. And I rather suspect, and this is you going back to the age
Correct.
of the legislation. It was really made for a different time.
But therefore,
Yeah.
get the change.
Yeah,
and
which is exactly what needs to happen.
Need to happen.
I mean, even put aside the legislation, the mere purpose for which this credit union was formed. This credit union was formed after an 80-day strike, and public servants after that strike was unable to access basic needs.
The 80-day strike was when 1999, 2000. It's not as long as you're talking about.
There was
Perhaps
one.
there were another one.
No,
Yeah.
no.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
No, I know, but the 80-day strike because I have to raise money for the Public Service Union.
There you have it.
I can tell you that.
There was another one.
Maybe.
Maybe.
But,
Right?
but I'm a little... Sorry, go
So
on.
yeah, so because of that, the inability to access basic things, that is why the credit union was actually formed. So in the future, something like that should occur, then the credit union would have some place to turn to. Then the public servants would have some place to turn to, which the intention was the public service credit union. And we saw it recently with the COVID-19 pandemic, whereby the credit union put together a product we coined COVID relief loan, $50,000 hassle-free to every member. 3,700, in excess of 3,700, almost $200 million was made available to credit unions at, although we say the interest rates are low, at a reduced interest rate, right? Because the interest rate at that time was 0.5% as opposed to the regular 1%, obviously because of the nature of the product.
I'm concerned about this business about 60 million, 60,000, and then you got somebody coming for
Yeah.
100,000,
Yeah.
a million.
Yeah.
That means that's 16 times more.
It is. But more often than not, that individual is also saving at a greater
Right.
at a greater rate, at a greater
Right.
level. And that is part of the reform that's needed. That has to really peg your borrowings to your savings. You know, the greater amount you borrow,
Yeah.
the greater amount you save. And
How you save?
part of the credit union rules is that you must save, even though thrift is always there. So even as you borrow a loan, some aspect of your loan repayment goes towards a saving account.
So part
Literally.
of your loan repayment, but you borrowed
Part
the
of your
money.
deduction.
Yeah.
You borrowed
So-
$1 million.
Right.
You don't put back anything of that million. Otherwise, you wouldn't have applied for $1 million.
So-
Yes.
So what happens is that what is required in order to be considered a bona fide member of the credit union, you must have shares in the credit union. Your literal savings is in the credit union make you a shareholder.
How much do you have to have
So
in savings?
the minimum savings is $1,000 per month. Every member, whether you have a loan or not. If you fail to save $1,000 per month over a 12-month period, your account goes into dormancy. So if you have a loan and your deduction is $30,000, $29,000 go to loan and interest, $1,000 go to your savings. If you don't have a loan and you choose to contribute to allow the deduction of $10,000, $10,000 can go to your savings. Right? The higher your savings, the more you can borrow. So the rules are this: you get to borrow 3 times your savings to a maximum of $1 million. That is one product, which we call the guarantor loans. So in order to borrow $1 million, it means that you must have a minimum of $333,334. If you have 200,000, you're allowed to borrow 200,000 times 3, $600,000. Right? That is the guarantor loan product. You can also borrow what we term the character loan, where you take a loan based on your savings, but that loan is 75% of your savings. So naturally, if you have $100,000 saved, you can borrow a loan of $75,000.
While still
Some people
maintaining-
call it a self-guaranteed
Guaranteed,
loan, right? We call it a character loan. Then there is the secured loans, which is car loans or vehicle loans, and you have mortgages. Those are secured by a bill of sale if it's a movable asset, using the registration, a bill of sale is taken out and so on. And the mortgages that is secured by a mortgage deed,
Mhm.
right? The security with the guarantor loan is literal in terms of you are securing 1/3. If you're borrowing 3 times, you're securing 1/3. You would need to get guarantors for the 2/3. So if you're borrowing 600,000, you have 200,000, you need to get a couple of persons to sign for you who must have the savings available, which is one of the reasons the credit union is able to maintain that low delinquency. The challenge that still allows some amount of delinquency with the guarantor loans is because your savings is actually doubled. Say if I have 200,000, Chris get 200,000, and you get 200,000. I come to you, you sign for me, you sign for me. I get me 2, you 2, Chris 2, 600,000, my loan is guaranteed. Chris now wants a loan. He gonna use his same 200,000.
Yes.
Yeah.
He come to me, I sign for he come to you,
Yeah.
you sign for he.
That's a loophole right there.
Right? Then now you want 200,000. So together we only have
This is not a loophole. This is a
together we
This is
have
a total
600,000, but we get to borrow 1.2 million.
yeah.
And that right there is where you find the advantage of the public service credit union is this. After, when you're paid, NIS is deducted,
Yeah.
PAY is deducted, credit union is deducted.
Mhm.
So before a member's money goes to the bank, it is deducted
Goes to them.
by the ministry or whichever
Entity.
statutory body, and it is remitted to the credit union. So saving that member leaving the public service,
You always get money.
you always get
money.
your funds.
But I
fully
still am
repaid.
concerned. Look, the lending has gone a far way in this country.
Yeah.
You now have a Financial Institutions Act. The lending, the biggest part of lending in Guyana is regulated by the Bank of Guyana.
Yeah.
They have, some may even say, it is draconian guidelines on provisioning,
Yeah.
on governance, and on ratios and all of these things. How could we leave a $6 billion organization which ranks with perhaps one of our commercial banks and say that they can no disrespect meant to the chief cooperative development officer who probably is struggling to get a good staff, analysts or anything like that. That's dangerous.
Yeah. It is a challenge indeed, and if you examine the development of co-ops, even right here in our neighboring countries, you would find that in Jamaica, for example, they are regulated by the central bank, the credit unions, and for that reason, because as you rightfully pointed out, the draconian measures, considered draconian measures by the central bank, the cost incurred to basically meet those measures, the reports and so on, and the compliance that you need to go through, what you find is that credit unions in those places started to merge because they cannot cushion that type of cost to comply with the central bank.
Yeah.
So if you examine Jamaica, for example, you would see credit unions would have merged tremendously over the past decade or so.
Yeah. And like Mr. Wizzy has said, it's certainly not a novel idea in this part of the world. There were some talks sometime in Guyana about bringing credit unions under the supervision of the Bank of Guyana. Things move a bit slow in this country. But
That's a public interest issue.
How
How many members does the Guyana Public Service Cooperative Credit Union have?
The last
How many depositor
Numbers.
members? Depositor
right,
members.
the last active membership, as we would consider it, is just over 17,000. On the books, the credit union has the last numbers I'm aware of is in excess of 23,000, but the last active membership is just over 17,000.
Now, you know, I had played a role in the Globe Trust entity, and we all know it collapsed, and thousands of ordinary folks lost their money. And that was regulated. You can say, well, look, regulation by the Bank of Guyana doesn't make you foolproof.
Yeah.
But it must be some cause for trouble, and we could get on to you people trying to become members of the committee. It must be a cause for concern that these funds and these members' funds are not as strictly regulated as if those funds were within the purview of the Bank of Guyana. I take the point that you're saying, but you also pointed out some glaring loopholes.
Yeah.
And it's irresponsible of the politicians not to try to address those loopholes. But you know, you mentioned that, okay, your loan performance equates with that of the commercial banks, but no, you have to carry loans that you can't ever write off. The commercial banks cannot do that. In fact, they're forced not only to provide, but to write off after a certain time. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't come after you.
Yeah.
But the Bank of Guyana, you see, the financial system depends on a bank being able to open its door and people come to collect money.
Right.
And I'm sure that is the same thing that could happen.
Yeah, there could be a run.
There can be a run.
There could be a run indeed.
The reality is, though, even if there is a run, if members, because with your loans, the guarantor loans, character loans, for example,
Really encumbered.
you are
You are
not
putting money
allowed
You're really
Withdraw,
encumbered.
yeah.
to
Really
withdraw
encumbered, Yeah.
in excess of your loan. So if you have a loan of 400,000 and your savings is 500,000, all you can draw is that $100,000.
Yeah.
So even if there is a run, majority of the members, people generally join the credit union to borrow loans. Rarely, there are a few members who save and they consider that, you know, a part of their retirement package, and they come upon retirement and they withdraw those funds. But apart from that, the majority of members, they join the credit union to save,
Well,
to borrow.
the Chief Cooperative Development Officer probably has an office staff, I would assume. Do they have persons who can do financial analysis, who understand banking, who understand laws, who understands economics?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure.
But
I'm not sure.
if there's an absence of those personnel, I can say with some certainty it's not for lack of
Resources.
resources. Part of the legislation that governs co-ops in Guyana is that there's a fund known as the Audit and Supervisory Fund, and its function is implicit in the name, Audit and Supervisory Fund. Co-ops
Who
are
holds that money?
the
Regulator.
regulator.
It is
Yeah.
literally paid over by check to the regulator
Okay, now
upon completion of the audit.
what can
So-
the regulator do with that money?
It's used to pay the auditors,
A part of it, yeah.
and is also used to exercise supervision, whatever cost is associated with supervision of co-ops. So part of the legislation is that co-ops are required to pay over 1%.
1% of revenue or 10% of profit, whichever is higher.
Annually.
That the more I think about it, the more it bothers me, because that does not happen among the commercial banks. Yes, you
Yeah.
pay a fee,
Yes.
no question about paying a fee.
A license fee?
Their licensing fees, etc.
Essential.
And you have annual costs, but you also has a statutory deposit with the Bank of Guyana.
We have that.
Similarly,
We have that.
it is held by the credit union, but there is the statutory reserves, which is actually 20% of your profits for the year. That is appropriated to the statutory reserves as well.
That's not how it works with commercial banks.
Yeah, I understand that.
It's-
That should be held by the regulator.
Not only that, and it should be based on your depositors' funds, because it's your depositors who will come for
Who will
money.
come, yeah.
It has nothing to do with what profit or loss you make.
That's true, but like
Understood.
Judah explained earlier, the great number of depositors are encumbered, in a sense. So, there's a reduced risk. Well, not just a reduced risk, but a reduced financial impact on the run.
So, you gentlemen are part of this court case, with the elections to be held, and some election was to be held this week.
We're not part of the court case, but we have a keen interest in the outcome of the court matter.
And what would be your interest?
Our interest would be that the applicants to the court case, being 3 ordinary members of the credit union, would have sought from the Committee of Management, the credit union board, a special general meeting. They did that via a petition, using the requisite number of signatures.
That's a requisition meeting, it's called?
It's called a special general meeting.
Yeah.
Yes. So the request was made on the 13th of May 2022, up to July of this year. The request was have been even given the courtesy of an acknowledgement or reply from the board.
That sounds to me like another weakness in the legislation, because as you know, Chris, as an attorney at law, if there's a meeting that is requisition
Yes.
and it's not called within a certain time, the members may proceed.
Yes, indeed, and that is also captured in the Co-ops Act. In actuality, what happened is that the chairman of the board, or the person who is performing the duties of chairman, is empowered to honor that request from the membership, which he did. But the greater board, the majority, would have reversed his efforts.
They had no such authority.
Indeed, and the court would have found likewise. So the matter came before His Honor, Justice Navindra Singh, and he ruled on the 30th of September that the request of the membership was indeed lawful and valid, and the actions of the acting chairman at that time in acquiescing to the request was indeed lawful and valid. And therefore, he would have set a date and time for the meeting that was supposed to be on or before the 24th of October, Monday last. Unfortunately, there were certain other requirements or certain other rulings contained in his judgment that was not honored by the credit union board in preparation and in execution of that meeting. So there was a boycott by some of the aspirants, some of the candidates who were vying for office, thought it wise not to participate in a process that was indeed contemptuous of the court, and was not obeying the order of the court to the letter. As a matter of fact, and this is most revealing, the credit union board itself, when it recognized that it was unable to really carry out all of the instructions of the court, would have applied back to the court for a variation of the court order. If nothing else says contempt to me, you apply back for variation of the court order, and the court has not had a chance to hear or to act on that application, but you went ahead and you executed the meeting with the variations that you applied for, that were not even granted. It is the most obscene thing. This is rank contempt. And
But somebody should initiate some action, isn't it?
indeed, and those are in the pipeline shortly, very shortly.
Now, so what's this thing about election and benefaction and all of this?
I will have my most learned colleague here.
You don't normally run from a question.
Not at all. So, the credit union held, after a 13 years hiatus, held AGM, annual general meeting, last year, April the 11th, 20.
You hadn't had a meeting for 13 years?
13 years.
Was the Chief Cooperative Development Officer in office over that 13 years?
Yes, and she would have imposed upon the credit union an interim management committee in the year 2018, May 2018. And that interim management committee,
But that's late into 13 years.
indeed, I think things take a bit of time in Guyana.
But no, this is one can't dismiss this. This is $1 billion organization, and you're running it like a cake shop,
Well, it used to be
or
run,
you're supervising it like a cake shop.
better use of words. That's the nature of the governance, unfortunately. But in 2021, the membership got an opportunity to elect its own representative on the board, and it elected 12 persons, 12 directors, and that board sat amongst itself.
That's a
And
very Christian number, isn't it?
indeed, but it one very Christian-like. In the final analysis, or perhaps it was
And you're
Christian,
not among the 12.
or perhaps it was
you're not among the
Christian-like.
12. You're not among the 12. There was one.
There was one indeed.
Well, it was a Judas, not a Judas.
For the balance of doubt. For the balance of doubt. Yeah. so unfortunately, in May of this year, approximately a year after AGM last year, the chairman of the credit union, Mr. Trevor Ben, was removed by majority vote of the board on the basis of a no confidence motion. This thing of no confidence seemed to have caught on in Guyana on the basis of no confidence motion. That removal indeed was sanctioned by the regulator. The legal and factual basis of it, I'm unsure and unaware of.
Was it challenged by Mr. Ben?
It was not challenged in court, at least, not through the judicial process. Perhaps it was challenged in the media, but not in court. The greater membership, having observed the recent development, on that basis, requested a special general meeting to discuss some of the concerns, including Mr. Ben's removal. And I rather suspect the incumbent board, sensing that would have been the nature of the meeting, simply ignored the request for a special general meeting until so instructed by the court. And even when they were instructed, they circumvented the court order.
But you know, you're painting a rather troubling picture of a $6 billion organization where a few persons, it would seem, can act in complete defiance of the law and the court.
It is indeed a stark reality. We have 12 board members, and there are 9 board members who are acting quite indifferent to legitimate orders of the court. I find it very dangerous for the rule of law in Guyana. And but I know the court has in its armory some very stringent measures that.
But you also are aware the court doesn't take action on its own initiative. Somebody has got to approach the court.
Indeed, and we intend to use the full armory of what is available to us.
And who's
Judicial- Team Ben, if it pleases you, intend to take this matter back to court and have it litigated and have the court, because the court has already taken control of the process. And I made this point earlier at another press conference that perhaps this is the first time in recent history that I'm aware of at least, that the court has taken control of an electoral process within the wider co-op society movement, the wider credit union, trade union movement, and we seem to
Well,
have
it's the
got,
first time that the court has been asked to intervene in such a matter.
perhaps indeed,
Yeah.
and
Well, it has to be. The court doesn't go and say, look, you know, we have some rigging going on in
Yeah.
in some cooperative society.
and I'm glad that you mentioned rigging going on, because we seem, and when I say we as a people, Guyanese, seem to have become accustomed to a certain level of toggery within these electoral processes for credit unions, trade unions, and perhaps for the first time, there's been some semblance of law and order. We seem to be reverting to our natural instincts or natural way of thinking that, no, we have to control this process the best way we can, not through law and order, but through some form of
But this requires real serious sanction.
it
I mean,
does.
you have people here who are risking the economic interest and welfare of 17,000 persons.
who have spoken overwhelmingly against the current committee management, and in total defiance of 17,000 persons seems to be hell bent on holding on to power.
Because the chief cooperative development officer is condoning it.
Perhaps, but at this stage, the court has taken control of the matter, and like you said, once we reinitiate our approach back to the court, then we should have a
Well,
resolution.
you said an interim management committee was put in place.
In the
So
past,
that has now been replaced by a legally and properly elected.
elected representative, yes.
Now, you are on Ben's team, or Team Ben. What is it you're seeking to achieve?
We are seeking to make the lives of our members better, and that initiative was commenced sometime post 2018 with the IMC. They came in, they cleaned shop. They did a 11-year audit,
10 years.
10 years audit. Literally, it was a consolidated audit of 10 years. Dividends were paid for the first time in about 12 years. Audits were done of the books. We had a CLA, a collective labor agreement with the labor union of the employees. After another course of a decade or more,
And who is the labor union?
CCW, Clerical Commercial Workers Union.
You mean the GPSU did not go for that one?
Interestingly enough, no. And there was a revamping of the physical structure of the credit union, and the ideas, the bold ideas came into play. We had a nationwide outreach campaign in January and February of 2021.
Yeah.
We visited every region in the country, and we inquired for the membership, consulted with them on what they would like.
Article 13 would be very proud of you all.
I'm obliged. I'm obliged to Article 13 and the good works that they do. But we went across the length and breadth of the country and interacted and consulted with the membership. And coming out of that interaction and consultation,
Means Team Ben, or
we being the credit union as a whole, the credit union as a whole, inclusive of Team Ben members, indeed. And that is what really birthed the renewed interest in mortgages, secured loans, study loans, and the mechanism and the rationale behind those products.
so
Really
Ben is
ca-
now. Sorry, finish
yeah,
it.
really came out of that nationwide consultation we had last year, January and February.
That's worthy of national emulation. I mean,
Indeed.
at that.
I would agree.
So, Mr. Trevor Ben, he's in the wilderness in terms of the credit union.
He's in the wilderness? No, not at all.
Is he still in place?
He is still the director on the board, because he was elected by the membership as the director. He is removed as chairman. The legal basis of which I'm unsure of, but he was removed. So at least he's not de facto chairman, or maybe he is de facto chairman. But he's still engaged with the membership, and his wider team have campaigned quite heavily over the last few days and weeks, and Team Ben has urged the supporters and the wider credit union membership not to support the special general meeting that was held Monday because of the varying lapses or the lack of adherence to the court order, and that was overwhelmingly supported. In total attendance, probably came out probably less than 149.
53 in person and 86
out of 17,000 persons.
Yeah.
So, what is Team Ben hoping to achieve? What's its manifesto?
So,
Well, in terms of the manifesto, of course, most of all, the objective is to continue the spectrum that the credit union has started from 2018 to present. Mortgages and vehicle loans were halted. The incumbent committee claims it was halted. We are of the impression that it was stopped. We are looking to restart that. We are looking to have an ATM put in place. We are looking to have a new modern facility in terms of a corporate complex, which includes the actual credit union services. We're looking to have a pharmacy. We're looking to have daycare so that the members can drop their children, staff can utilize it, and all sorts of other amenities within that complex. The land was already acquired. It's at Upper Hatfield Street. The incumbent committee of management refused to do anything with the land, right? So we're looking to change that. We're looking to add new loan products, and we're looking to continue to add to the lives of the members of the credit
But
union.
you are essentially running a financial institution.
Yes.
Yes. Whether there's no demand deposit as such, so you wouldn't be on par with a commercial bank.
Correct.
But would you be prepared with the Ben team, and you are obviously articulate members of the Ben team, especially you, Mr. Thompson.
Noted.
Would you be prepared to support supervision by the Bank of Guyana?
So, every aspect of transparency and every aspect that will bring financial
Am
wellness.
I getting a yes or a no?
You are getting a yes, but you get a conditional yes because it depends on what the Bank of Guyana is coming with. But we are for transparency and we're for financial wellness. If the Bank of Guyana would impose the same measures currently employed with commercial banks, of course. If it's something different to that, then we have to examine it and see where the pros and cons.
Well, I don't think they'd be able to do anything different because they're bound by the same same regulations and the
Exactly.
what they call supervision guidelines. But they
Yeah.
have strict codes of conduct as well.
Yeah. That is very important and very much needed.
There is a code of corporate governance.
Very much needed.
And you see that is certainly necessary to hold certain positions in financial institutions. Persons are expected to have, a certain level of qualification and experience. As far as I know, since I left the credit union as a chartered accountant in the position of finance manager, no one has replaced me. Why should a $6 billion organization function without someone that has the requisite qualification? This is a financial institution.
Well, I may have to ask you an interview question here. If you were to get back if Team Ben and your team were to win, would you go back to the To the credit union?
In the position of a director? Most certainly.
I wasn't thinking of a director.
That means I
In the
don't know.
position of a director, most certainly.
Yeah.
Chris, you feel, sorry, go
Sorry,
on.
no, go ahead.
You feel passionate about the role of co-ops and the role of that credit union in making the lives of its members, the average rank and file public service worker. What drives that?
I do indeed, and it goes all the way back to our ancestors, indentured and freed enslaved Africans, especially enslaved Africans, pooled their money together and bought villages. That right there is a co-op. Freed enslaved people coming together with pennies and cents were able to acquire entire villages, and we cannot undermine that great legacy that was given to us. I always say this is probably perhaps the one of the few legal jobs an attorney could have, where you are doing your work as an attorney and at the same time you are fulfilling a greater need, a higher purpose, a greater call. So I feel very strongly about co-ops and very concerned as to where it's heading currently in Guyana.
Mr. Luigi, I'll give you the last 15 seconds of the program. Time has run out on us.
I am grateful. Thank you for having us here this evening, Mr. Ram. Thank you for inviting myself and Mr. Thompson. And to our members out there, just know that we are in the business of changing lives, one member at a time. Good evening.
Well, thank you, Mr. Luisi, Mr. Thompson. It's been a pleasure having you. We see each other all day, of course. Thompson works with our legal outfit, and Mr. Luisi works with our accounting outfit. They're both reputable, very competent individuals. We can wish them luck, but most importantly, we wish the credit union success, and one hopes, and our hopes that it gets over this imbroglio that it has found itself in, and that it will become a force to be reckoned with and a vehicle to transform and to continue to transform the lives of poor, ordinary public servants. Operators and viewers, thank you, good night, and I'll see you next week.
Look down from your window, no big city lights, just greenery. I don't know what you come for. Listen up, my dear, we're such a man free. Welcome to the land of many faces, not one, not two, but 6 different races. You know when the sun kisses your skin, you're in the right place.